Welcome again, new and returning listeners to the Ajametrics podcast. Now, you know the Ajametrics podcast. Here we explore the insights, the stories, and lessons from inspiring leaders across all industries. So I'm your host, ever excited Tammy, and today we have an incredible guest. Yes, her name is Kimberly Wiefling. Now, if you know her, you know about Scrappy Leadership. But who is Kimberly Wiefling? She's a dynamic leadership coach. Now, she's known very particularly for one thing. She's an expert in turning managers into true leaders and helping teams achieve the seemingly impossible. In fact, in this podcast, you hear Kimberly say something about the connection between the impossible and many difficult. In this episode, Kimberly will share her journey from the corporate world as an engineer to becoming a transformative leadership expert. She'll talk about her unique approach to leadership, scrappy leadership, she calls it. She emphasized the importance of relationships, teamwork, and pushing beyond the limits of what you think is possible. So what am I saying? Like I always say, sit back, relax, grab your favorite beverage, grab a pen, grab paper. You're going to learn a lot today. So sit back as you will get inspired today as we dive deep into the world of leadership and how to turn your biggest dreams into a reality. So if you are a CTO, a CEO, a CFO, a leader of people, leader of teams of people, this podcast is for you. And even if you are a Scrum Master, a product owner, you work with people, you lead teams, you encourage teams, you coach teams, this podcast is for you. So stay tuned as we go into this conversation with the one and the only Kimberly Wiefling. Thank you. So welcome to the Ajametrics podcast. Like I said earlier, we have with us Kimberly Wiefling. So Kimberly, can you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us about yourself.
I am continually changing, so I'll introduce myself as the person I am today. I have been working in the corporate world for over a decade as engineer, scientist, technologist, and then I understood, oh my gosh, human skills were important, so I shifted more into project management and project leadership. And then I realized it wasn't about the stuff so much as it was the teams and the organizations. And now here I am finding myself facilitating leaders, turning managers into leaders, turning groups of people into real teams and leading them on an adventure to achieve what seems impossible. And my expertise, weirdly enough, my physics background, I have a master's in physics, has somehow become useful because for me, physics was always so impossible. And I spent so many hours trying to do the homework. And now doing impossible is merely difficult. And I do impossible things with the people I work with all the time.
Yeah. I remember you said something in one podcast I listened to that. You said your dad said it's only difficult or it's only impossible because you haven't found out how to do it yet.
Yes, exactly. And I always love to quote my Lord Kelvin, who said in 1895, heavier than air flying machines are impossible. And that's when there were birds. Birds are heavier than air.
True.
Physicists can also be stupid.
True. So now I gather you've spent quite an amount of time in the leadership space. So my question to you is, how has that journey been? Can you give us some highs and lows? How has it been?
Yeah, when I was first put into a position of leadership, I was an individual contributor leading a project of about 12 core team and 120 extended team, developing a mass spectrometer for Hewlett-Packard. And I got that position kind of by accident because I complained about the person they were going to let lead the project. And you can imagine how much that person loved me after that.
Oh, awesomely.
So we did this project, and I was all about getting stuff done and being very demanding. And then that worked, but they didn't want to work with me again, you know. And then over the next few years, I learned to lead a team, to build relationships and get results through relationships. And it takes a little longer, and maybe sometimes it's a little slower, but it's more enduring. And now I look back and think, I really should have studied psychology as well as physics. Because you got to work with human beings. And
True.
so now I'm all about results through relationships. And you need a team to do impossible things. And getting these things done in the corporate world and in organizations in our world, it's a team sport. And
Yeah.
you can't do it alone. I can do everything better than anybody, but I can't do everything.
That's very true.
A
That's
little
very true.
humility.
That's very true. And you know, there's something you just said that reminded me of when I was in university. I read a particular book, and the guy talked about leadership styles, and he mentioned the fact that if you crack the whip at your people and get them to do stuff, you will do a lot, but you can't replicate it.
That's
So that
right.
if you want repeated, sustained success, you need to understand you have to walk through people.
Yes.
That's the only
Yes.
way that guy may be more successful at the instant, but over time.
Yeah. And if you want to grow the next generation of leaders, they don't develop into great leaders by being told what to do, by bossing them. And there's even books, called Boss Hole. So yeah,
I
we
can
need
guess what that
to.
means. Yeah.
The hierarchy is destroying organizations. Hierarchical
Mm,
systems are toxic and dysfunctional by design. It concentrates power, and power corrupts, as we all know.
mm. Very true. Very true. So now also looking through your profile, the podcast, the YouTube videos that I saw, really amazing stuff that you have out there. I see that you are particularly, like I put it here, you're particularly a leadership coach. So my question to you is, and to the audience, so that people can get this, because I believe that the things you've talked about in the past and from what I've seen are really instrumental to today's and tomorrow's leadership structures. Because right now, what we are seeing in organizations, some organizations that have really grown, are beginning to realize that we need to shake off this old way of doing stuff. There has to be a better way to do things that is
Yes.
sustainable and all that. So, what can you tell us, to our listeners? What is leadership coaching exactly?
Well, for me, what I say to people is, hey, you can't see the back of your own head. All right. I'm
Mm,
here to help you see what you cannot see. And I'm not here to tell you to do this or do that. I'm here to ask you, what is your big crazy dream? What seems highly unlikely or darn near impossible? But if it were possible, you would be just shouting, woohoo! And that kind of leader that you want to be. And let
mm,
me help you be that kind of leader. Of course, I do bring in results, expertise, and data, facts, and research about what are the best leaders in the world saying and doing, and some examples. But my job is really to help that person achieve what they would love to achieve, but they somehow think it's not possible, it's not feasible, it's not realistic, or their friends, family, and colleagues have told them it's not feasible, it's not realistic.
mm.
Now, the people who try to discourage them, they're not mean, they're not trying to be nasty. They're
Yeah, yeah.
trying to spare them from disappointment.
Mm, mm. From the
But
pain of
I
disappointment, yeah.
personally, I can take disappointment. What I cannot deal with is a life without hope.
Yeah, yeah, true. And someone said something to me some years ago. He said, when you get to a certain stage and you look back, you don't regret the things you did that didn't do too well. You regret the things you didn't try at all. You
Yes.
then realize the thing that held you back has now become, hindsight is 2020, right? So you're seeing it perfectly. And you
Yes.
realize the thing that held you back was so tiny that you could just push through.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my goal for my end of my life is no regrets. And that is what I would hope for everybody, because our society has developed in a way that says, don't take risks. Oh, don't make mistakes. Don't fail. And I mean, I mostly work with Japanese companies for the last 20 years. And there it's even more intense, the shame associated with
Hmm.
failure and mistakes. But then I live in Silicon Valley, all right? We don't call it failure here. We call it a prototype.
Exactly. Fail fast. Yeah,
Fail
yeah.
fast, fail forward, fall down 8 times, stand up 9 times.
Exactly, exactly. I think I heard you said that's one of the Japanese sayings, right? Fall down
Actually,
seven
they do
times,
have one like that,
get up eight
Nanakaroba
times. Yeah.
Yaoki. Yeah, yeah. I didn't know that for many years because And I was so shocked to learn that there's a Japanese saying that's fall down 7 times, stand up 8 times. But one of my Japanese executive colleagues that I was doing some coaching for, he said, no, Kimberly, it's fall down 999 times, stand up 1,000 times.
That's encouraging. Yeah. So when I was looking through your stuff, I kept on seeing this everywhere. There's even in your name here, Scrappy Leadership. So can you tell us about that? Because when I saw it, I was like, I get the concept. I get for me, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, Scrappy, that's interesting because when I was writing my first book called Scrappy Project Management, I was trying to think of a title and I wanted something that suited me. And I come from a family that I always say, oh, yeah, I was raised by wolves, grew up in the forest hunting and fishing and riding dirt bikes and climbing trees and all kinds of stuff. And the word scrappy kind of captures this attitude that I got from my Wiefling family heritage, which is, oh, you think it's not possible? You think we can't do it? Get out of our way. Those of you who say it can't be done should get out of the way of the Wieflings because we're doing it and do all kinds of wild things. So I grew up not understanding the limitations that most people are raised with. And then it's also scrappy, it's kind of messy, right? Oh, it's not really socially acceptable or politically correct. And sometimes you don't always care about your impact on people. For example, the name Wiefling, my friend in Germany told me it comes from the word gewieft, which means someone who's really clever at getting things done, but doesn't always care about the impact on others.
Oh, wow. You come full circle.
Oh, yeah. So I guess it's genetic. And then I had my 23andMe genetic test done and found out I have more Neanderthal DNA than 90% of human beings out there. So I think there's a little bit of that Neanderthal still running around in the Wiefling family.
Interesting. Okay, so that's where the name came from, yeah?
Yeah, I didn't know that until a few years back. It makes perfect sense because it's not just me, my brothers, my dad, my uncles, my aunts, my mom. She's not even a genetic Wiefling, but that woman can get anything done. She's 84 years old. She's out there yesterday. Oh, I raked the yard. Oh, yeah, I'm going to clean the windows now. Mom, you're 84 for God's sake. She goes, oh,
Wow.
come on. I got to do something. I'm bored. So she got to jump up and throw in a load of laundry.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the scrappy leadership style, what is it?
Okay, so it is willingness to jump off the cliff and while you're falling and screaming, grow wings and learn to fly. It's messy and there will be the need to take risks and there'll be the mistakes and you have to experiment and prototype and do it again and again and keep going, keep growing and not give up. And yeah, sometimes you'll fail miserably and then sometimes you'll succeed wildly and figuring out kind of unusual ways to do things or things that wouldn't be approved of, I mean, I would walk in as an individual contributor at HP. I would walk into the president of the division and say, hey, I tried to get this guy to help me in manufacturing to increase the throughput and production of our mass spectrometers, but HR told me they weren't allowed to let anybody work here for free. And he would say, what's their name? Give me their phone number. Boom, done. Whatever it took, man, whatever it took to get things done, I would do it. And I'm just like, So I guess saying to me, no, it's impossible. I'm like, ha, 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 get out of my way. Let me just try something else.
Yeah.
Of course, I feel the shame and humiliation. Of course, I feel embarrassed whenever things go badly. I do. And I sink into the icy couch of despair for a few minutes, and then I crawl back out and say, all right, what's next?
Yeah. I think, and that's the way, because when you look at it, because when I hear scrappy leadership, what comes to my mind is pragmatism, right? You obviously plot You plan that this should produce that, but you're also open to adapt to it not really working that way, taking your learnings and then trying again.
Yeah, and when you look back at all of the inventions that have been accidental, for example,
Mm,
Teflon, there was a gas tank and it had no pressure and they hadn't used it. And so instead of throwing it out and getting another gas tank, uh, they cut it open and they found Teflon lining the inside because the gas that was in there had formed Teflon. Now, can you imagine those guys could have just thrown that big tank out? And Post-its were like, oh, they were a failure because they didn't really stick. Well, I use
yeah.
Post-its all the time, millions of them in my career. Yep, there you go. Everybody's got them, right? Hold up your Post-it.
Everybody. Exactly. And that's the truth. Yeah. The amount of things that we've done accidentally in the world that are now inventions that we go, oh, yeah, what would life be without this? But some of them are just in the path to doing something great. They stumbled on something greater.
And I've found as I've grown to love music over the years and playing some hand drums, African hand drums, and also getting into rhythm circles or jam sessions. I'm not a great musician, but I really enjoy doing that. And what I've learned from the jazz world is there are no wrong notes. A
That's
great
what Matthias
jazz.
said.
You
Yeah.
know about that. Tell about that. You tell.
I think Matthias said like the only note that is wrong is one after. Like once you get
Yes,
that note right, then there's no wrong note.
that's right. You just keep going and the whole team makes it work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And if you're working with a team like that, it is tremendous. I had an incredible experience. Oh, last year I was having a really tough time. I was struggling and I was kind of grouchy one day, and I really was obnoxious to my two colleagues who I was co-facilitating this workshop with. And I
Hmm.
was openly, publicly obnoxious to them, saying some things and criticizing them really. And then I realized, oh, what's wrong with me? So I went and I hid behind a whiteboard. And whenever they went on break for lunch, I was terrified they would come back and be really mad at me. So my one colleague comes back and says, Kimberly, are you okay? Oh my gosh, I cried because they cared about me and they wanted to support me. So
Hmm.
rather than focusing on my flaws and my mistake and my terrible behavior, they were focused on, hey, what's going on? How can I help?
Coming home. That's
Yeah,
leadership.
that's an agile team.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So now I'm thinking, off the moment, I'm thinking. So obviously, you've had, like you said, you've had varied examples. Can you give us an example of when you walked into an organization, you came with your scrappy leadership, your scrappy notebook, and your plan, and then it actually worked? As in, you're like, yes, help the leader, transform the division.
Yes. Actually, I've been working with one Japanese company for about 17 years.
Oh wow.
And I started just doing this global leadership development program. It was a 6-month program. We had 15 days together over 6 months, 5 days in Europe, kicking off 4 to 6 impossible projects, and then 5 days in the US. 3 months later, the teams would work in between, and
Hmm.
then 3 months later, wrapping up in Tokyo, and then at headquarters presenting these impossible projects to their executives. And after many years, some of the executives who were leading divisions that were outside of this program, they said, oh, help us with post-merger integration. And then so this company acquired a giant piece of another global company, and they needed to somehow integrate people. So I started working with that organization to help them come together and find out, what do we have in common? What do we share? You can
Hmm.
imagine how people like in the US feel when they're told, oh, you're being acquired by a Japanese company. Terrified. And
Yeah.
yeah, because you've heard so many stories about how the Japanese really boss and
Yeah.
hierarchy and this
Very
kind of stuff,
precise.
strictness.
Yeah.
But like I worked with them to help them come together, build relationships, build trust, and come together and build a shared future. And those people who were acquired by this company over time, because of the leaders in this Japanese company being truly global, They were global people from Japan. Those people started to say, thank goodness we were acquired by this company.
Oh,
Because
wow.
in the global company, they were an obsolete division that was kind of going out of favor. And, the market peak had passed. But this company was investing in them as a potential future possibility for them and their division and their products. And that really turned things around. And I remember talking to one of the president of the division, and I said, "You're too scary. You have to show up less scary." And he showed up the next time wearing dog ears on his head. and the one time while we got together, because there was some worries that people weren't changing fast enough, right? And so I put up a pretend coffin and a cross, and I was playing funeral music. And when people came in the morning, I had kind of co-conspired with a few of the executives to support me in this little ritual. And I started to say, "Oh, it's so sad. Oh." And then one of the executives shouts out, "Yes, he was so young." Oh, and we were talking about the death of their company. And so everybody was like, "What's going on?" And we had this pretend funeral for their company. And this dark side, then we flipped to, okay, suppose we didn't die. Suppose we transformed. Suppose we did all difficult things, the impossible things that everyone says can never be done. And then they got real excited about doing that, and they have done it.
That's impressive. I know for our listeners, first things first, I would say Kimberly's book, the link with the show notes, 1. 2, people may listen and think, oh, yeah, that doesn't go far. But truly, I'm telling you, I was in a meeting once, in a big room planning meeting, and a very senior person answered. A lady asked a question, and the senior person answered the question in a way that kind of shut her down. He didn't go out to shoot her down, but the way he answered was pretty much like, this is the answer. You should know this. We said this before, that kind of stuff. And I'm not kidding you. When the lady sat down, I observed her demeanor. Her hands were shaking for 5 minutes at the least. She did everything to hide it, but I noted it immediately. And I noticed, I'm like, that's how powerful the tone of a leader is.
Yes.
Because they look up to, as a leader, the guys you work with, people you work with, look up to you for so many things.
Yeah.
So you have to be, I always say, but the leader has to be the most approachable, because all he had to do to that lady was, oh, I don't really get this. Okay. So do I understand your question? This is what you're asking for. Give me a couple of minutes, I'll get back to you. So even if you felt pressured to go, you should know this, young woman. It's like giving some time to decompress, answer her like a colleague. And then, because after that question, Kimberly, no jokes, no one asked a question anymore.
Oh, no kidding. Well, you know what? Here was my approach with this organization I just described. I asked the president, is it okay if we ask you dangerous questions? And he said, sure. And then I told everybody, put on a post note, a dangerous question, write in the same color pen on the same color post note, block letters. So nobody knows who wrote it. And then I put a whole wall of dangerous questions up there. And then I let the president choose. I said, every time we come back from a break, or every time we're taking a pause, you go and choose one of those dangerous questions. And he got to choose which questions he wanted to answer, and he answered them. So there are tools and approaches to reduce the fear. Because, even if you're a wonderful, kind, loving president, hey, that title clanks along behind you and everybody knows you're the president. And if you've got a spouse who doesn't work, a kid in college, a mortgage payment, you're not going to take those risks. And one CEO even said the day I got promoted was the last time anybody told me the truth except for my wife.
That is so true. Yeah. And it's I don't know, it's the world that we live in today, right? There's the truth, and there's the truth that saves my behind. So people choose between the two.
Yeah. And honestly, there's a lot of challenges facing organizations. It used to be, incremental improvement would be okay. Incremental improvement is not going to get the job done. You can't make a car by designing a faster horse. as one famous person once said. And we need to be willing to take these risks to leap to the next possibility. And many times that won't work. I mean, in Silicon Valley, the startup scene, funders fund a dozen startups, maybe one is successful, and that's a normal ratio. Now, inside of a company, if you have one chance in 10 of success, your company's not going to take that risk. So what some large organizations have done is they spin out a little part of their company that's the innovation incubator. And quite a few Japanese companies have innovation incubators inside Silicon Valley. For example, Yamaha Motors has Yamaha Motors Silicon Valley. But a lot of times they're not generating ideas. What they're doing is they're looking around, they're acquiring, they're partnering, they're licensing, because they know they cannot create innovation inside because the culture is too risk averse and failure is fatal.
That's so true. Wow. Because just when you said that, I remembered Jeff Bezos, Amazon. I saw an interview of his, and it was after the Fire phone flopped. So lady interviewing him was like, "So what do you feel about the failure of the Fire phone?" His response was phenomenal. He was like, "Failure? No, we learned a lot." He said, "I'm going to do stuff tomorrow that's going to fail, and the day after that, all I'm after is one success, and I will keep doing stuff that fails until I get it."
Yes, we call that fail forward. Just fail in the direction of your goal. Like when you're playing American football, when you get tackled, you don't just lie there crying like a baby. You get up and you go for the next down. And what some companies do, and I think this is brilliant, is when there are mistakes and failures that, not the same predictable. I mean, my book's called Scrappy Project Management, the 12 predictable and avoidable pitfalls every project faces. I mean, let's fail for new and more exciting reasons. But when someone makes a new failure, a new discovery, something they can learn from, they get up in front of the all employees meeting and say, "Hey, we want to thank Benedict because she created this experiment and it didn't work, but we learned so much from it. And thank you," and give a big applause and celebrate that learning and celebrate that risk-taking attitude. Because like you said, if you make it scary to ask a question, no one will ask another question. If you punish people who make a mistake, no one will take a risk, no one will experiment, no one will innovate.
Yeah. And by that leadership structure and the lack of innovation, the company is dead tomorrow.
Absolutely. Or sooner. I think the lifespan of the Fortune 500 companies has been shrinking over the past 100 years. And, it doesn't take long to go out of business these days.
It doesn't. No. It doesn't. Just 2-3 bad years and that's the end.
Yeah, because it's so easy to copy what you're doing if what you're doing doesn't involve this amazing human beings, right? If you have people that are innovating and edgy and scrappy and they can do amazing things and they're willing to go the extra kilometer, for your effort, you're going to win compared to these other competitors. But if you're just milking that cash cow and making people afraid to take risks or innovate, well, first of all, the great ones are going to leave. I mean, retention is a huge problem. There's a giant worker shortage. Germany and Japan are facing almost 20% worker shortage. Even in the US, before COVID, it was predicted there will be a 3% worker shortage for skilled workers. So you're just not going to be able to attract and keep the people you need to play this business game.
Yeah, very true. And I think in our pre-discussion, you mentioned something about the global epidemic of dysfunctional leaders. So I'd like us to touch on that because it is true. It is true. We have managers in positions that have 0% leadership skill and they're just crushing the departments. Departments are doing less and they're demanding innovation, demanding excellence, but the environment is just toxic to the point of the height.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that's contributing to that. One is, do you drive a car? Do you have a driver's license?
Yeah.
Were you allowed to drive before getting a license?
No.
No. But you could be the CEO of a company without knowing anything about the most basic leadership skills.
Yes.
And you don't have to take a leadership test. I want to have the leadership learner's permit, the leadership license before you start subjecting your people to that kind of stuff. So, and then the other thing, because it's been known for 30 years, Barry Posner, Jim Kouzes have studied for 30 years leaders in 100 countries. What are the best leaders doing, saying, thinking, and how are they behaving? How are they perceived? It's well known. And you don't even have to believe it. All you need to do is look at these lists of 5 practices, 30 behaviors, and start doing it. And people will think you're a better leader, even if inside you feel like a complete fraud. But then there's the other thing, which is this learned helplessness. Are you familiar with that concept?
No.
Learned helplessness. That's why I use my chicken. I have the chicken, and then I
drop it.
Yeah, and people always say, "Well, it's gravity that caused it." I'm like, really? Gravity?
No, it's not.
I can't change gravity. Is there anything else? Oh, you released it. So there's a lot of people in organizations who think, yeah, it's really messed up, but I can't really do anything about it because it's my manager who needs to change. And the managers are like, well, Kimberly, what can we do? It's the executives who are causing the real problems. And then the executives are like, yeah, the president, it's really
it's always somebody else. Yeah.
The president's saying, when the chairman dies, we can make some good changes. I'm like, go ahead. I hope your competitors are patient, because that kind of patience ain't going to work in this global competitive business world. Yeah. Yeah. So so here's what I tell people. Ignore the org chart, and leadership is not position. In an org chart, it's not a title on a business card. Act like a leader, communicate like a leader, think like a leader, and you will be a leader. And sometimes you'll be rewarded for your courage and your scrappy leadership, and sometimes you'll be fired for it. So what? That's what it takes to be a leader. My goodness, how many jobs have I been fired from, or we have no longer need for your services, Kimberly? I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. Sometimes people aren't willing to change. I mean, one of the people I work with at one of these big organizations that's so dysfunctional said, Kimberly, if we're that screwed up, how come we're making so much money and we're so successful? And I'm like, because your competitors suck. I mean, the average in the US, the employee engagement is the highest in the whole world that Gallup Research studies, all these countries, and it's only 35%.
And when I read that, I was like, wow.
Yes. And the best companies have double that. Can you imagine? The best companies have twice as many engaged employees, and they're making way more money, 20% more profit. Their stock price is going up much faster. But hey, these screwed up organizations are happy because, hey, they're still in business and they're making profit. Yeah, well, I call that going out of business as slowly as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So when you think of it, and what I want our listeners to understand is that when Kimberly says engaged employees, what she means is that their brains are switched on. They're contributing to the pool of intel in the organization, creating great stuff. So not just that they're chatting about, no, their brains are tuned on to the company's mission. So you can imagine double the percentage in a company.
Yes.
It's light years apart. Light years.
They care. They come to work and they care. They've got something they could finish in the next 10 minutes, but it's after work hours. They'll stay and do it. They've got something that's really outside of their real job responsibility, but if they did it and they could save some time and make some progress, they'll do it. They'll take that risk, right? And they'll support each other in doing what needs to be done. But other people, they come to work just for a paycheck. And that's a dangerous place to be in this competitive world.
Yeah. I watched a YouTube video. In the video, the person that was talking was interviewed by someone, but the guy that was talking worked at Tesla at the start. So then the interviewer asked him that, so how was he working with Elon Musk? And the guy smiled, said it was easy. That working with Elon, if you're willing to do your job, simple. If you want to just play about, you will hate it working with Elon. Because all Elon wants to know is, once you're doing your work, what do you need to keep your work going? Who is in your way? He will help you throughout once you're doing your work. It was fantastic. But if you're just there to chill, you're going to be in problem with Elon, because Elon he isn't there to play. there's something to do, so that's it. And it gets to the point that if you hear anyone complaining, those were the guys that didn't want to work. Simple.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the way it was working with me. And I honestly, I so love working with people who are absolutely committed to doing extraordinary things and going the extra 10% and putting in what needs to be done and helping me be better. I mean, I'm going next week to work in Chile with a large telescope team at the Rubin Observatory. And I've been interviewing each and every one of these people. And I ask everyone, what do I need to do? What can you tell me? What advice do you have? Can you help me? When I'm there and I make a mistake, will you take me aside? Will you whisper in my ear, hey, Kimberly, this might work better? Like, if you're committed to making it work, then we can make impossible merely difficult. But if they just sit there and go, okay, what do you got for us?
Yeah.
Let's finish before we even start.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. So now I have a question here that I usually ask people. I call it my time machine question.
Okay.
So I usually say, if you could walk into the time machine right now and go back 20, 30, 15 years, and you met your younger self, what would you tell yourself, knowing what you know now?
I would tell her, take a few psychology classes.
I like that.
And the other thing, and more important, hope and optimism are not stupid things that risk failure. Hope and optimism are a strategy for creating a better future. Like Noam Chomsky said, optimism is a strategy for making a better future, because unless you believe that future can be better, it's unlikely you will step up and take responsibility for making it so. And I was afraid to hope. I was a cynic. I was negative, and that was protecting me from disappointment.
Disappointment, yeah.
Well, what I have learned is I can take disappointment. I can deal with that. What I can't take is a life without hope.
Okay. That's a very very good thing to say. So if let's say, let me bring up my wand and make it happen. Okay, now I've done it. Now all the leaders in the world are listening to you right now. All the leaders in the companies and the countries, and you have one sentence to give to them. What would you say? Or two sentences or three. What would you say to them?
Okay, the first sentence is, be the kind of person you want your people to be. If you say one thing and do another, nobody will willingly follow you as a leader. And the next thing I would say is, create a clear and vivid image of a future. When they close their eyes, they can see it, feel it, taste it, smell it. They know what it sounds like, and create such an amazing future that they also can see their own incredible future sparkling in that vision, in that dream. That is such an important piece of your work. If you don't do that, then it's just a job. Give them something they're creating, a purpose beyond profit, a mission that matters. And then the last thing I would say is, appreciate, recognize, celebrate. If you don't tell people when they're doing something right, they might stop doing it. So be the kind of leader you want your people to be, inspire that shared vision, and celebrate and appreciate and recognize sincerely, specifically, in meaningful ways that lets them know you are making a meaningful difference to this organization, to this team, and to our world.
Wow. That is deep, Because you just realize that it's not, this is mind blowing, because, when you look at it, leadership, if you think with the idea of do what you want them to do, how you want them to present. So, because I always tell people that a lot of time leadership is a mirror. You are a mirror. You present to the organization the best version of any staff there. So if it's how you carry yourself out, the best of them would ascribe to that you do. Because I once worked in a place where part of leadership was being a horrible boss, so to speak, was being a mean person. Get it done. You hear stuff like, get it done. Don't give me excuses, give me results. Right? Now,
It gets results. Unfortunately, that works for a while.
yeah, exactly. Now, it wasn't like you said, it wasn't because the person was mean. It was what he or she saw ahead. So it
Right.
replicated the same. And then so you tell the guy that is doing the work that mentality. He tells one that is, contributing to the work the same thing. The one that is contributing to the work tells the other person because they assume that's leadership language. So they pass it down. So that's really powerful. So thank you very much for that. So
Oh, yeah.
leaders, you heard Kimberly.
And you have to understand that sometimes even the person who's the most powerful in your organization, they have to deal with things outside of their control, like the competitive landscape, or maybe something like the board of directors or a bureaucratic organization that's giving them a grant or something like that. And these things are, even they are feeling this learned helplessness that what can I do? It's out of my control. It's not my fault. Why are you blaming me? Everybody needs to step up and say, look, there's always gravity. Hold on to the freaking chicken.
Very true. The chicken, hold on to the chicken.
Yes, right on. And just say, what can I do? How am I contributing? Sometimes I play this game where I pretend it's all my fault. And then if it was all my fault, then that's great because then I have control over how to change it.
Yeah. My final question. This question usually gets people head scratching. So the question is, what question should I have asked you?
Oh, my favorite question is what today seems impossible, but if it were possible, would transform you, your community, your organization, and our world for the better.
Wow. Okay, so I've asked that question to you now. What will you say the answer is?
Somehow I get access to a platform that reaches over 1 billion people, and with an example of a project I got a chance to work on where we did what seemed impossible and it touched the lives positively of 1 billion people. For example, sustainability. People are always saying, oh, the sustainability, the climate, the crisis, we're all going to die. I'm like, really? Or we can commit to transforming planet Earth for the better, for the good of all. We could commit that every single person on planet Earth has enough to eat and clean water to drink and a decent education and a safe place to live and health care. And there's plenty, in India. If India didn't have any food rotting, they would be a net exporter of food. And now people are going hungry and starving there. Come on. One of my clients makes a bag liner, an oxygen barrier that keeps grain from rotting. Let's transform planet Earth for the better, for the good of all. Let's share our excesses. Let's not make it cool to accumulate wealth you can never use. Why do you need $50 billion? $1 billion can make sure everybody on planet Earth has clean drinking water. Get it done.
Wow. And it's so true because you look at it, it's a system we built up for ourselves that people assume you have to lose for me to win.
Yep.
But
That's a zero-sum game. That's not life.
But we can win together. We can win together. We can make it good for everybody.
Yes. I usually walk around and I always find pennies. And my grandmother, my long ago dead grandmother, she sends me pennies. And when I find a penny, I get a wish. And I've found thousands of pennies over the years. And I wish for myself, for my friends and family, my community, for the world. But when I was in Thailand last month, I realized, oh my gosh, there's mothers on the streets with their babies lying on blankets begging for their next meal. And so I started leaving coins on the street. I'm like, it was my chance to leave those wishes. And we can make a difference no matter how small. If 1 billion of us would stand up and do something positive every day, or what if 8 billion people on planet Earth each did one thing to help someone else every day? Can you imagine how quickly and how miraculously this world would be transformed?
Yeah.
It's not all about money. It could be just a kind word. Let someone go in front of you in the grocery store line. Don't cut someone off in traffic on the highway.
I know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
8
it's the
billion
little things.
people.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, every day contributing to the greater good, the rising tide that lifts all boats.
it has been transforming listening to you, because when I look at it, you see, I always say something. People that really look for how to solve problems, we have like a kindred spirit. We say the same thing in different ways.
Mm.
So one thing I've gotten from you is that leadership has to have a human face. One, it has to be pragmatic, it has to be adaptable. Then it has to realize it is leadership. It's not
Yes.
that's one. Two, then a leader has to understand what is expected of me. Do I need to be trained? Or even a leader should get training. But like you rightly said, at 16, 18, you want to drive, you get a driver's license. You get license to drive. What the license to drive means is, at the very least, we've put these things, this little group of things in your muscle memory. You know how to turn left, how to turn right. You know the gears. You know how to look for hazards. You know what the street walk, what it means. You know what that light means. So if all else fails, you'll be good at these 7 things. So leaders start thinking about themselves like that. Okay, what are the basics I must hold as a leader? Because what happens in a lot of organizations, at least in my experience, is you're good at your job, so we tell others. You're good there, tell others. Good there, tell others. And eventually become CEO. But it doesn't mean you are a leader. It just means you are good at your job. But being a director, CEO is more than being good at the job you do. You are
That's
a
right.
mirror. You're meant to be like a shining light.
And you know what? I have made these Kimberly's one-page guides to leadership, to teams, to organization, and what the leader really needs to know and do. It fits on like 2 pages. And I'm saying, seriously, you don't have time to read 2 pages? And if you just hung these 2 pages over your toilet, where you'd see it a couple times a day, and you practice one of them. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not kidding. When I was working as a project leader in a startup, we had to get the project done or we were finished. I put the project goals, milestones, and deliverables over the urinals in the men's room and in the bathrooms on the door, so everybody would see them a couple times a day. And I'm like, I'm sorry, zip up before you turn around, because I might be coming in to update those posters.
Okay, so thank you, Kimberly. So how can they get in touch with you? I know in the show notes I'll put your LinkedIn profile, but how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, there's only one Kimberly Wiefling on planet Earth. If you spell my name properly, Wief as in fun, Ling. If you just Google me, search for me on any search engine, you're going to find my websites. You'll find my phone numbers. I'm not so secretive. And you can always reach out to me at kwiefling@gmail.com, or just call the police. They'll know where I am.
I heard you said that before, and wow, that's very clear
Ah,
directions.
well, I'm just kidding about that. But yeah, I'm kind of surprised there's only one Kimberly Wiefling on planet Earth. But there aren't that many Wieflings in general. I think we might have done something to annoy someone long ago, and a bunch of us got killed off. But yeah, I'm happy that people reach out to me, and I always am willing to do a prototype, uh, whatever I call it. I used to call it pandemic pricing, free. If there's a prototype, do a 3-hour, a 6-hour one day, do an hour, have a discussion. Doesn't have to be about money. When I was in Shanghai, I did 2 different projects 3 different projects for 3 different organizations for no money at all. They promised to pay me originally, and then they changed their mind, and I said, no problem, I still come.
Oh
I did it.
wow.
Yep. So, I mean, of course, I love it when people pay me what I'm worth. That's wonderful. And money is not the reason I do my job. I do my work because I am committed to transforming planet Earth for the better, for the good of all. And we are going to do it together. I can't do it by myself. I got
Yeah.
to have a band of brothers and sisters and my siblings to help along the way.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much, Kimberly. It's been fantastic talking with you.
My
And
pleasure. So fun to
yeah.
be with you again. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Agile Machines podcast. I hope you found our conversation with Kimberly Wiefling as insightful and as inspiring as I did. We went from pushing the boundaries of leadership to embracing the impossible. There's so much that we can take away from her experience and also use for our own world of work and all that. So if you enjoyed this episode, don't keep it to yourself. Share with your friends, your colleagues, and anyone who's passionate about leadership and personal growth. And if you haven't, make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it so you never miss a future episode with amazing guests, amazing leaders, and definitely invaluable insights. So stay tuned. We got a lot more content coming your way soon. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Agile Matrix podcast. Cheers, everyone.